Hi, I'm happy to share with you my limited knowledge on Israeli state and society. And when we analyze as social scientists this specific society, as we usually do on other societies, we build on common binarism. In Israel, it's usually tensions between the Orthodox people and the non-Orthodox, between Ashkenazim and Sfaradim, which is an ethnic category. We build, on classes, on middle class, upper classes, and lower classes. And we build about veterans, those who came to Israel during the early years of its existence, as opposed to the newcomers. And of course, a common binarism stretches between, builds on gender. When we talk about gender, we usually differentiate between the different sexes, different genders, mainly between males and females, but not only. So my short talk with you today is built on three ethnographies that I did in the Orthodox and the ultra-Orthodox society in Israel. I started my ethnographic research in the mid-'80s, and I've been following this segment of the Israeli society for the last over 20 years. So actually, we're going to look backward a little bit. We're going to look back in history and frame the main problems that I've been paying my attention to, and follow those problems as they evolve, as they roll in time, and as they change, if they change, and the direction of this change. And as I said in the beginning of my talk, the interest that I had in the ultra-Orthodox and Orthodox societies was in the life of the women. As an anthropologist, I need to spend my time with the people that I research and try to experience their life. And of course, I couldn't do it with men, or I could do very limited things with the male society. And it was easier to share and to understand and to describe and to experience the life of the women. And within this major, or within, it's total life, it's the whole range of life that people have, I was interested in the intellectual life of the women. And why this came as the major question, because anthropologists try to let the field itself tell them what is the important issue at hand. And when I spend the time with a certain family in a certain neighborhood near Tel Aviv, from the Hasidic sect of Gur during the mid-'80s till the beginning of the '90s, I kept coming and going for around 4 or 5 years, and I'm still in good relations with some of my informants. Actually, this morning I was just talking on my way here with my main informant. And so I was spending time with them, doing the home errands, taking care of the kids. And when I asked where do the women meet as a community? Where do you see each other as adults? The answer was when we study, when we go to study. Now, these were women in their 20s, and they were all married and young mothers. And they found a time to leave the homes and leave the kids either with their partners or other babysitters, and to go once or twice a week to study Torah. Now, they grew up in the ultra-Orthodox community. They were studying in ultra-Orthodox schools. Why do they have to go and study again Torah while it is known that the women are exempt from the study of the Torah, and this is a man or a male mitzvah, a man or a male deed? In order to answer this question and to follow it, as I follow it from the ultra-Orthodox community to the modern Orthodox community, to the Sephardi Orthodox community, and to those who are returnees or chozrim b'tshuva, we have to go back to maybe the macro framework that this course is all about, and put in democracy. The community that I work with is many times seen as a secluded, a sect that lives outside of time, outside of history. They continue a sort of an 18th or 17th century Eastern or Central European way of life, and their habitus is frozen. Well, this is not the case. This is a modern society. This is a society that was framed or was answering or conducting a dialogue with Zionism, with modernism, with nationalism, and the way ultra-Orthodoxy is acting as a political and as a cultural group, it has to do mainly with the fact that they need to be relevant in the modern context. And in the modern context, these people live in a democratic society where, at least supposedly, all people, all citizens have the same rights, and that therefore everyone should be exposed to the same education, same knowledges, enjoy the same rights and serve the same duties. But we know that this is not totally the case, yet it has a lot of influence on the way that people see themselves and on the way that the gender relations are slowly and gently changing. When the ultra-Orthodox community had to rebuild itself after the Holocaust, and in the presence of the enthusiasm of the new state of Israel, which was Zionist and in many respects I wouldn't say anti-religious, but the ultra-Orthodoxy wasn't its elite or hegemonic group in any way. They had to reorganize themselves, and one of the tools was to frame the society of scholars, to send all men to the yeshivot, unlike the situation in Europe or in North Africa, but we are talking now about Ashkenazim, to send them all to school, to send all the girls to school and reteach them and re-educate them so that they will see themselves in the future, all of them, not some of them, but all of them, as the wives of scholars. So they will go out and work, so they will support the families, so they will be those who will be will come and go and negotiate with the state and with the outer world, allowing their man to stay in the yeshivot and study and rebuild the society that was broken and extinguished in the mid-20th century. And amazingly, the plan, this cultural, political plan, with the support of the State of Israel, that they exempt the man from the army service and that they paid stipends for the man, succeeded. And the women, in a very short time, fantasized and built a romance of being the wife of a scholar. But alongside with a society of men scholars grew a society of women, of knowledgeable women. They went to school, to regular school, and studied 12 or 13 years. But they did not study Talmud. And this is what I was curious about. What do you do in the afternoon or in the early evenings that you go to study Torah? This is what they told me in the neighborhood. You know what you need to know to be a good wife and a good mother. So what is it that you're studying there? And I cannot go into the details, which are all laid out in my book, which is titled Educated and Ignorant. But what I finally came to understand is that the women needed to experience the society, to build a parallel and experience what does it mean to be a Torah scholar. So they had to do it in a female, legitimate way. And they gather once, twice, some of them 3 times a week for an hour to read together and interpret together texts that are not Talmudic, but texts that are allowed to women. It could be the portion of the Torah of that week. It could be ethic texts that have to do with moral and ethics. It could be halachic, all kinds of laws about how to do the Shabbat and how to do the meal. Nothing is new, but all scholars of Judaism always come back and repeat known texts and ever again find new things. So I followed a parallel society of women scholars who came to a sort of a paradox that I describe, in which they are not touching the forbidden texts, but they manage to create a habitus, a way of life of women that see themselves as intellectuals, that see themselves as fit women to live alongside with Torah scholars, their husbands, and are curious enough to continue their education even when they're mothers and when they're wives and they grow older. And the phenomena of ultra-Orthodox women leaving their homes at night, and there's always work to do at home, and there's always something that you need to be at home, and there's always someone who tells you in a sort of, I could call it paradoxical or mean way, that this is where you should be. So it's always telling you stay at home but come to study at the same time. They do go out and they do continue their education. And since I told you that I've been following this society from mid-80s till today, I can tell you, even when I relate to the ultra-Orthodox community alone, that by now there are little groups. They made sort of guerrilla groups. They don't go public, but they do start to study in little groups Talmud. They start to study texts that were not allowed for women. They not only study, they write their own commentary. This is very, very, very a small phenomena. But for me as an anthropologist that sort of thought that it's coming, it's reassuring my assumptions that it's impossible to live in a democratic society and with blocking the people as free citizens, even in a sectorial group like a Hasidic group, from exploring the possibilities of a citizen in this community. So this is what I have to say in regard to the ultra-Orthodox community. Now, when we follow and when we take those same questions of what am I allowed to know, what kind of text can I read, what am I going to do with my knowledge once I have it, how is it going to influence my status as a female, as a wife, as a mother, as a friend, as a daughter, as a sister, within all the gender relation system, we see that those questions were really burning questions in the modern Orthodox society, and which was my second research. And I started doing my ethnographic research in the beginning of the 1990s of previous century, and I followed a revolution, and I was lucky to be on site in real time to follow an intellectual revolution, which is also a religious and halachic revolution, led by gender relations, led by females who were cooperating and relying on good teachers, male teachers that supported them, that said that it doesn't make any sense that women from the modern Orthodox society who go to the university to study law, medicine, physics, psychology, whatever, and this is totally okay, that they will not be able to study Talmud. And this revolution that started in the mid-70s, and of course it has its roots before, but the last phase of it started in the mid-70s, came to a peak in the early 90s, and from then on it's rolling and rolling, and more women have a full approach to the Talmudic text. Not yet in high schools. Some do have it in high schools. None of them start like the boys, at the age of 10 or 11. Some, or maybe very few, may do it at home privately. But the public systems start in the high school, and the establishment of midrashot, of colleges, Torah colleges for women to spend a year or two in between their army or national service and their academic studies, or along with their academic studies, to study halakha, and more so to move to the second phase, not only the intellectual phase, but also to take it into the synagogue life, into the worship level of how do I serve God? What is my place in the synagogue? Can I conduct a pray? Can I say Torah commentary in front of the public in the place where I pray? What is the meaning of the mechitza, the separation of men and women in the synagogue, etc., etc. So it moved from the women lift their eyes from the books, looked out to their community and said, where is my place in this community? What can I do? How can I participate not only as a scholar, but also as a worshiper, as a member of my community? And moreover, when we take it further, can I start to be a female rabbi? And that too is another venue that I don't have the time to talk about it, but it's been developing and it's still developing. And we see here a lot of change. Also, another place where this beginning of intellectual revolution that I witnessed took the women was to their sexual management, to their management of their body as a holy body, as a Jewish holy body that has to follow the halachic law of purity. And here too, which is a very, very loaded, it's a very, very touchy subject, the women are trying to conduct a change. Who's going to tell me how to manage my body? Who's going to tell me how to manage my sexuality? So I could see within, sociologically, I mean, this is a short time. I started my ethnography in mid-80s. By the end of the 90s, there were already many such colleges. I started, there were 6. I assume that at the end of the 90s, I know that there were 25, and I assume now that they are more and more. They're very legitimate, and almost all the young women from the modern Orthodox, from the religious Orthodox community, spend some time in their early adulthood as full or part-time Torah scholars. And this is a revolution. And also the synagogues don't look the same. Many of them do not look the same. Now, in order to conclude or to sort of span through the major 3 Orthodox societies in Israel, which is the Ashkenazi Haredim, the National Orthodoxy, and the Sephardi Haredim, I started in the early 2000s a research among Sephardi Haredi community, also near Tel Aviv. All my research was not in Jerusalem and not in Mea Shearim, not even in Bnei Brak, although yes, the last one was in Pardes Katz, which is a neighborhood of Bnei Brak, but it's a very different neighborhood of Bnei Brak, which is mostly Sephardi. And there I try to ask, or I ask the same questions about what can a woman read, and what can she know, and what can she do with her knowledge as a ultra-Orthodox Sephardi woman, and maybe as someone who is enhancing what it's called mitchazkot, women who come from traditional families and decide to go full or fuller, as a fuller participant in the halachic Jewish life. We know that the Sephardi communities are way more heterogeneous. You can find in the same neighborhood people that range from traditional to just starting to check out whether I want to be Orthodox, to very Orthodox Sephardi, and then maybe ultra-Orthodox Sfaradim in the Ashkenazi manner, in a way, because there's a lot of influence from the Ashkenazi Haredim on the Sephardi Haredim. And I joined a group of women who studied in the community center in Pardes Katz. They studied not Orthodox, the not Torah studies. They studied to be medical secretaries, but that gave me the way into the community and what kind of knowledges they seek to achieve, to be professional, to study English, to study computers. And I assume that by first holding some knowledge that they lacked, because here we need to say also that these communities are from the middle and lower economical classes. So these women, not only that they are Orthodox, female, Sephardi, they are also poor, or some of them are from the lower middle classes. So they seek in their personal journey to better their lives, not only to find meaning to their lives as returnees to the religion, as mitchazkot, belief and moral answers, but also economical answers. And the cynicals say that by returning to Judaism, they find the economical solution because people are going to pay them for that. Well, this is a very, very limited and cynical comment, although it might be true but that you have support because you're a part of a community and your schooling might be easier. but they still suffer from the same economical problems, sometimes maybe even more. So then I follow the women and I follow them into other venues also where they study Torah. And what I found there is that the women are coming to these groups in a hope, as I said, to better all their lives, not only their lives as believers, but to better their position in the Israeli society, because as sociologists we can say it, they do not phrase it this way, they have been excluded or they have been discriminated on several layers, as I mentioned, on the ethnic layer, on the periphery and center layer, on the economical level, and also on the gender level. So the women that I met there, which is the last ethnography that I wrote, were seeking actually to reposition themselves in the public sphere, in the Israeli society, and their movement is therefore very complicated, and it's not either to be in this camp or another. They try to remain Zionist, to care about the general society, because many people from their family are not where they are, and still to push forward their religious knowledge, but also their civil knowledge. If I have to conclude the relations between gender, or to situate gender in the religious orthodoxy and put it vis-a-vis the non-Orthodox communities, we see that many times a lot of things are more similar to what is happening in other communities than different. That is, that the women and the men see themselves as modern citizens, they want to be equal citizens or more equal citizens, and they do accept the fact that education is a platform to move forward. And therefore they're trying to sort of work, I wouldn't say to break, but to lean on the gate that closes other knowledges from them, and to try and open more and more doors or more and more gates in order to come across and be able to approach more knowledges that will change their lives.